Welcome to another edition of the Draft Headquarters podcast. I'm your host, Seth Cox, and with me, as always, my co-host and fans of losing teams, Justis Mosqueda. What's up, Justice?
Yeah, just dropping a couple more passes.
Yep.
Dropping a couple more passes. Trying to impersonate Jordy Nelson dropping that would-be 94-yard touchdown.
And then, of course, Justin Hignett, who will not talk about the Browns or Johnny Manziel for at least a week. So, how's it going, man?
It's going good. I'm on Browns vacation this week. No, there's a moratorium on Browns talk for me.
I don't blame you guys because it's been tough, and well, I mean the NFL's it's fun, but it's infuriating at times too. Of course, we're here tonight to talk about the 2015 NFL Draft, and this week specifically, we're going to start with the bowl games and really kind of dive into the preview of the bowl games. We're also going to talk about the list of invites that have accepted invitations to the Senior Bowl. Pretty big list came out today from Phil Savage on Twitter and other media outlet publications. And then finally, as we always do, we'll wrap it up talking some hot takes and then just some takes from this weekend. I'm sure everybody had some good ones, even though there was no college football outside of Army Navy game. There was no college football, so the prospect hot takes were down, but there were definitely some hot takes on the NFL and previous drafts and things of that nature. So, but first, let's get started with of course, the bowl games and the bowl games that are about to come up. We're going to just go through the December 20th through the 22nd bowl games, and then next Monday, hopefully, if everything works out, we're going to have another look at the next set of bowl games. So the first game up is the New Orleans Bowl on December 20th. It's Nevada versus Louisiana Lafayette. And to be just quite open about this, outside of a couple of games, you're talking 1 to maybe 5 prospects all, throughout the entire game being played. So this week will be a little shorter on the bowl game stuff, and it'll be more on the Senior Bowl invites and those names, and kind of our opinions on what's going on in the Senior Bowl. But again, Nevada versus Louisiana Lafayette, the New Orleans Bowl. The big name, probably just because of the love he gets on Twitter because of his hair, is Brock Hecking, defensive end out of Nevada. But there are some interesting prospects coming out of this game. Justin, who are you going to be watching, and who are you looking for in this game?
Hecking, like you said, with the blonde platinum mullet, like he's the guy people have seen on the defensive side. But flip to the Louisiana Lafayette side, and I think they've got 2 legit NFL defensive line prospects. Christian Ringo, who plays mostly defensive end for them, and he led the team with 10.5 sacks. He's a 6'1", 280-pound guy, so he's like undersized and he won't play outside, but I think he projects as a late round situational, like interior pass rush pressure player. And then the other guy they have inside is Justin Hamilton. He's a more prototypical size for a defensive tackle, like 6'2", 310, and he was second on the team in sacks, I believe. He had 4 or 5, something to that effect, 9 tackles for loss. So he was a player that really impressed me, and I wrote an article a couple weeks ago just about like some under-the-radar guys that kind of impressed me, and Justin Hamilton was one of them that I thought could sneak into the late rounds and make an impact. So if he's a player who gets an all-star game invite, he's one for me to watch on Saturday. And then you also have Cody Fajardo, the quarterback for Nevada, on the other side. So to me, that's the matchup, is those 2 pass rushers, Hamilton and Ringo, against Fajardo, and see if they can protect him enough.
Fajardo as a quarterback prospect in just a really weak class. Justis, is he a guy that could get a day 3 look, um, depending on how he plays?
Yeah, I mean, really, what the 6th and 7th round are just like getting your bids on guys you want in camp. Those guys don't always make the team, so I can see someone doing that because right now, I mean, I have a camp grade on Fajardo. I mean, I don't think he's to the point where you'd say, oh, he shouldn't get a shot at the NFL level. I'm just really not impressed by anything he does. So it's yeah, it's just hard for me to fathom spending a mid to early round pick on him. So I mean, after if you need a quarterback and you have a sixth, seventh rounder, just sitting there, I mean, might as well go for it. I'm not huge on him though. Like you guys said, Brock Hecking is definitely like the dude for Nevada. I haven't watched much Louisiana this year. One guy I'd say to keep an eye on for the future though is Hassan Henderson, the huge receiver that they have out there. I know people in Reno were like, "Yo, this dude's gonna break out this year." He hasn't done that. I mean, he scored like 4 touchdowns. He's getting like 60 yards a game. So he's doing all right for himself, but he's not breaking out like you thought. A 6'5", 6'6" receiving target there would have. But he's definitely a guy to keep an eye on down the line because he's definitely on the NFL's radar already.
Any other guys you think might have a chance to be looked at here? I mean, it seems really limited in this game. It's not a bad thing. It's just, it's Louisiana, Lafayette, Nevada. It's not, it's usually 1 to 2 prospects a year for those teams, and it sounds like Hamilton and Ringo are really those guys. Anything else on this game, guys?
Yeah, UL Lafayette has a couple of offensive players who might, get some tryouts after the draft. They got quarterback Terrence Broadway. He's a transfer from Houston. I've watched him a couple of times. I don't think he's an NFL quarterback, but it's possible he gets a look. Alonzo Harris is a senior running back for them, and he's had some pretty impressive games. I just don't think he has NFL speed. He's kind of like one of those like Antonio Andrews types, the guy from Western Kentucky a year ago. He's probably going to run like a 4.8 and be off everybody's radar. But he's had a couple of good games, so I'd say he's worth keeping an eye on.
We still on? Moving on to the next one?
Oh, sorry. I forgot to hit the unmute button. All right, let's try that again. That's good because I couldn't remember the guy's name I was talking about either. Alonzo Harris is an interesting guy because he's huge, and he's like, 6'1", 240. And what I was saying before I couldn't remember the guy's name, I wonder if he's going to get the Robert Hughes treatment, kind of like Hughes did out of Notre Dame, where he wasn't picked up, but he was a camp body, and they kind of converted him to a fullback, and now he's, Arians here in Arizona that won't call him a fullback, but he's a fullback by what he's asked to do, and you wonder if a guy like Alonzo Harris could be kind of get that treatment at the NFL level, because like you said, he's a big dude. I mean, anybody that's 6'1", 230 and plays running back's a big guy. So, next game, New Mexico Bowl. These games are so funny. Utah State and UTEP. So, the interesting one to me, and the guy, he's got an NFLPA invite, is Eric Tomlinson, the big tight end out of UTEP. He's like 6'7", 270. Is he going to get a look late in the draft because of the ability to block, and kind of how you're seeing a little bit more of big tight ends, as extra offensive linemen, guys that can move a little bit more, be used in the NFL, or is he strictly, in your guys' opinion, an undrafted prospect, and we'll start with Justis on this game.
You know what? I haven't seen that much UTEP this year, but he was like everywhere on these watch lists. And like when I was talking about, guys to look out for, as far as tight ends are concerned coming into the year, people would, I mean, the tight end class is, the position is just weak across the board, because those bodies usually play on defense or on offensive line. But his name would be dropped in with, the West Saxons and all that. And his quarterback Showers, who's a transfer from Texas A&M and almost won that job from Johnny Manziel at Texas A&M, is also in the game. He's someone to watch out for. I know Emory Hunt likes him a lot. As far as UTEP guys are concerned, those are probably the two. On Utah State side, Zach Vigil, who I believe has a Senior Bowl invite and was the Mountain West Defensive Player of the Year. He's a linebacker. He's going to get a look. He's probably a guy who's going to go, day 3 as far as linebackers are concerned. I think he'll probably stick on to a team, though, because he'll play special teams. It sucks that, Kyler Fackrell, the linebacker, who everyone thought, could have been a first, second-round pick, is hurt, and Chucky Keaton, who, some people were really excited. I say some people like it wasn't me. That people were really excited about coming into the year. It sucks that, like, the two potential biggest names in this game aren't able to play.
Justin, is Vigil easily the best prospect in this game?
Yeah, I would say so. I mean, he was a player who I had no awareness of. Early in the season, I was watching Utah State to watch Chucky Keaton. And while Chucky Keaton was really having a tough game, and this was before he got hurt, Vigil was standing out. And he was one of the few players on their side who was doing so. So to see him get Mountain West Player of the Year, and I think at this point he just has a Shrine invite, but I guess he could potentially move up to the Senior Bowl. But he had finished here with 9 sacks, very effective blitzer up the middle. Don't know what he would give you in pass coverage, but he is going to, he's a tough run stopper. I could see him like hanging on as a special teamer, being like Justis said, a day 3 pick. I wanted to touch on Tomlinson just because I think our listeners should just Google Eric Tomlinson, look at his bio, because he looks like a honest-to-goodness Viking. He just has that, he has that long hair, that long beard. If you just take a look at his picture. I know Jeff Risden from Bleacher Report, Detroit Lions Draft, he projects Tomlinson as a potential developmental tackle, so a guy who could put on 20 pounds and maybe play on the line. And then UTEP also has a wide receiver, 6'5" wide receiver named Ian Hamilton. And I don't know what kind of prospect he is. He's probably not going to run very well, but he has made a couple of really acrobatic one-handed catches this year. So it'll be interesting to see if they can get the passing game going with him.
And when you talk Utah State and UTEP, like Justis said, you had two guys in Chucky Keaton and Fackrell who were the big names, and they're injured now. And so you just hope that these guys stay healthy and that they get the chance to kind of prove their worth on the field, as opposed to just getting hurt and it kind of being over for them. Keaton might be able to make a comeback, but he's been hurt, 3 or 4 years in a row?
Yeah, it's not looking good. Actually, Dave T. Thomas, who writes for Scout.com and does stuff with the NFL, wrote a piece recently about injured quarterbacks, and he still thought, Chucky Keaton had a draftable grade. He also had Braxton Miller as like a 4th, 5th rounder, and also said that not only was he interested in Oregon, he was looking at Arkansas, which I found interesting.
The Brett Bielema connection.
So I'm going to skip the next game in terms of when it's being played, because I think that's the most interesting game that we're going to go over this week. And we'll go to the famous Idaho Potato Bowl and the vaunted Western Michigan versus Air Force. Air Force kids are just in a predicament where they have a service commitment after they graduate, so it's always so rare to have any type of prospect from the service academies, and maybe one of them. I know Navy has a kid going to the Senior Bowl as a long snapper, Joe Cardona, but it's just so rare for those guys to get looked at. And then you have Western Michigan, who they seem to have some good players in the secondary. Um, Outside of their secondary, Justin, is there anybody else we need to watch?
I honestly couldn't tell you any player from either one of these teams other than Western Michigan corner Donald Selskar, and I really haven't watched Western Michigan, so I don't. It'll be my first time looking at him. You alluded to this. I don't ever watch service academies with an eye towards scouting because they are facing a 2-year military commitment, and I just don't have time to go that deep. But Selskar, I know a couple people on Twitter, and in particular Ethan Hammerman likes him a lot. I don't really know much about him, so it'll be my first chance to get a look at him. But my big board, when all said and done, I would be shocked if Western Michigan player ended up on there.
Yeah, and you look at this game, Justice, and just the kind of dearth of prospect talent available. When you watch a game like this, do you look for something that somebody that flashes, and then go back and see if you can find more on them, maybe at Noon Kick or Draft Breakdown, or even if you have ESPN3, or do you just kind of wait and talk to people and see if there's anybody worth watching?
I think you talked to people a little bit beforehand. Like Justin said, I mean, I haven't watched any Western Michigan this year. The 3 names that I've been able to jot down, though, from hearing other people talk about them, are Salazar, like you guys said, the corner, Justin Curry, the safety, and then Willie Beavers, who's junior guard. So he's probably a guy that you look for next year. But, we're talking about this game, and we're talking about 2 guys who, are even really on NFL radars, and, even they're probably, projected currently as free agents. You're just hoping something flashes. If something, if that secondary doesn't flash, I think you just kind of, move on. Because if they're not going to flash against guys like Air Force and stuff like that in a big game that's nationally televised, it's probably not worth your time to just invest, 4 or 5 games watching them just to see, okay, are they free agents or are they not free agents?
I think what we're really saying here is if you are sitting around at 5:45, that's a good 5:45 Eastern on Saturday. It's a good time to take your wife or girlfriend out, have some dinner. It's a good time to go have a couple of beers, maybe run a couple of errands, and get home for the later game.
Yeah, get home from Air Canada. Get home by the time Air Canada kicks.
And that is our next bowl, and I'm going to butcher the name probably, but the Camellia Bowl, South Alabama versus Bowling Green, the mighty South Alabama versus Bowling Green. This is actually a fun game, and Justice kind of alluded to it because of Brandon Bridge. But he's probably not the best prospect in this game. Wes Saxton is a tight end from South Alabama, 6'4", 240. Big guy, and Justice talked about it earlier, down tight end class. What does he have the opportunity to show in this game, and how important is it for him to come out and look good, Justice?
Well, South Alabama's played some good teams like South Carolina and stuff, but playing against a team who's in the MAC championship, that gives them a good shot at competition. Wes Saxton really has some issues with some drops. That's something I've noticed when watching Brandon Bridge. But, he has the production. And, a lot of college tight ends don't produce, and he produced for multiple seasons. We're watching guys like, Clive Wofford, who's really, they're only doing it for 1 year and stuff like that. Those are probably the 2 guys I'd look to for, South Alabama's Saxton and Bridge, the quarterback, who I think he's he called himself Baby Cap in that interview with Dave Brugler of CBS Sports and NFL Draft Scout. I think he actually like owned up to it and said, called himself Baby Kaepernick. As far as Bowling Green is concerned, there's a couple guys, but the best guy on that team was Chris Gallen. And when Chris Gallen got hurt, I just really like the first time I saw Bowling Green was in that MAC championship game against Northern Illinois, and that's the only time I've caught them. They're kind of a fun team to watch. I mean, MAC teams aren't like terrible, but they don't usually flash. Not being able to see Gallen is probably the main reason why I just kind of avoided Bowling Green the entire season.
They're a young team, Justin, Bowling Green is, but they have a guy that was all MAC or all MAC second team, and Gabe Martin. Does he have a chance to be a special teamer in the NFL, you think?
I really couldn't tell you. I mean, Bowling, kind of flipping back and forth between that game and the Pac-12 championship last week and or 2 weeks ago, and it just really didn't pique my interest. I look at these guys and make myself a list at the beginning of the year, and Bowling Green had two guys, and that was Chris Gallen and the quarterback Matt Johnson. Both of them got injured, both of them out for the year, and Bowling Green just becomes an afterthought to me. So I really couldn't make a judgment on Gabe Martin. I know he's undersized. I know that he's on NFL Draft Scout's kind of list of players. Beyond that, I really couldn't tell you what his impact is going to be. I can add one player to the South Alabama side, and that's their receiver, Shavaris Smith, who has made a couple of big catches for them, probably the most reliable receiver this year. And the other game that they had that was a national game that South Alabama had was a Friday night earlier in the season. And before Brandon Bridge before he got injured and kind of became ineffective for the rest of that game, he made a pass rolling to his right and fired it to the end zone. It was the best pass I've ever seen him throw. And Shavaris Smith was the receiver on the other end of that one. So that's one more name to look out for on that side. As far as Bowling Green, if I was taking notes, somebody would have to stand out for me to actually put them on my list.
Yeah, and that's honestly the tough part, and why when people start tweeting out I know now the guy's name's escaping me, but there's a lot of people that tweet out these NFL teams are at this game and they're at this game, and it's really hard for teams to invest time and talent into going to watch the Camellia Bowl when the same day you've got a Utah versus Colorado State game. So which we'll get to in a second, but anything else on South Alabama and Bowling Green, guys?
I think that's it.
No.
All right, and the last one, which is next Monday, so we'll be on probably while it's going on, is the Miami Beach Bowl. I don't even know what bowls these are anymore, to be honest with you. I couldn't tell you what bowl it used to be because they've changed so much. But we have BYU and Memphis. BYU always has an interesting dynamic because most of their players are older because they are usually Mormon and they went on their mission, so they're usually in that 23 to 24 range. And then Memphis is still trying to find its way in this prospect land of they're a basketball school still for the most part, but they both have some interesting guys. Justin, why don't you start us out on this one?
For BYU, it's just a bummer that we won't get to see Taysom Hill. I mean, he was their dual threat quarterback, and he was off to a good start. And earlier this year, before he broke his leg, really was passing the ball a lot better than I expected him to. But you said it. He's an older prospect. He's going to be 25 going into next year and he's a redshirt junior. So I don't anticipate him coming out for the draft off an injury. He'll probably be a guy here. they've got another. I don't think he's going to play in running back Jamal Williams. So, and then you've got their defensive lineman Bronson Kafusi, and he's pretty much said he's planning on coming back next year. So he's a big guy, 6'7", like 270. But again, I haven't been watching a ton of him because he's made his intentions of coming back. Here is in the box safety and Craig Bills, and I think he's Taysom Hill's brother-in-law, actually. And then you have Jordan Leslie, a big receiver who was a transfer from UTEP. Those are the two, like, maybe semi-draftable guys that are going to be suiting up for BYU this week, not counting Kafusi. And then, on the other side of the ball, I haven't got to see a lot of Memphis. I just saw one game, and I tuned in to watch their linebacker, Tank Jakes. And early in the game, he was ejected for targeting. So I know Jakes has had a real productive season. He's an undersized backer. He's like 5'10", 5'11", like 225 pounds. But he's put up some big numbers as far as tackles for loss and sacks. So that's probably the guy to watch out for. And they have a defensive end, Martin Effetti, who's another player who I think some people consider draftable. But this will be my first chance to look at either of those guys, really.
And Effetti is going to the East-West Shrine game as far as I remember. And so that'll be interesting. Justis, anything to add on these guys?
Yeah. Effetti almost declared last season. I think Pauline said that. And he was hurt a little bit earlier in the year. But, he's done well since. I mean, Effetti was always that weird guy where you just, like, you'd pop in, like, a box score, and you'd just be like, how is this guy making so many moves? So, like, I think he had, like, 25 – he had, like, something like 25 tackles for losses last season. The previous two seasons coming into last season before he was going to declare. And, he kind of stood out. I mean, his numbers kind of dropped a little bit this season. But he's definitely a guy who you at least look and you're like, oh, okay, you might be someone who could play in the NFL. He was on a bunch of watch lists and stuff because a bunch of people thought he was going to, turn up that production instead of decline. Like Justin said, Tank Jakes, that's really the other guy that I'd be looking at in this. He's kind of, undersized linebacker, junior college transfer at Memphis, and he only spent one season in junior college. He ended up being the defensive player of the year there. Jinx is really a big fan of him. He had 15.5 tackles for losses this season, and he forced 4 fumbles. I mean, this guy just kind of plays everywhere. I saw a UCLA game. I think I saw another game in Memphis, and he was just making a play. Like, he was just everywhere. He's definitely someone that should be on NFL radars. I mean, he's a little undersized, but that's fine. Like you said, Bronson Kafusi, I think that's how you say his name. He said he's going to come back. I mean, it's like his whole family's at BYU or something right now. It's like his wife and all sorts of stuff. So it sounds like he's not going to come out. One guy I'd say to look at for BYU in the future, besides Bronson, would be Devon Blackman. He's a receiver. He was like a 4-star recruit who transferred out of Oregon. I think he's sitting out this season, but I remember at one point he was suspended from the football team for wearing earrings. So as long as he doesn't wear earrings next year, he'd be a receiver that you'd want to watch BYU's offense cook from.
Conduct policy, gentlemen. Conduct policy. So
yes.
Anything else? I know 2 other Memphis players have Shrine Game invites. Fritz Ateni and Bobby McCain. I'm not familiar with either of them, to be completely honest. I don't know if you guys are either, since you didn't mention them. So, but there are 3 guys from Memphis going to the Shrine Game. So, I mean, when you look at those like Shrine Game invites, do you then jot those names down and those numbers down to see if there's anything to worth go back and watching, especially before you go out to the Shrine Game, Justin?
I jot them down, yeah, definitely. I'm going to try, what I do when I make these trips is I try and get at least a glimpse of everybody before I go down there. But sometimes it's just not possible with the time permitting. So if, for example, if there's a guy down there who I have not had a chance to see, and I didn't go last year, but the name that pops to mind is Pierre Desir, and he ended up getting a call up to the Senior Bowl after that. If there's a player like that, then I'll do whatever I can to try and dig up and catch up on tape for that guy. But some players, the very first time I went to the Shrine game, I made a point to see every single one of those guys, at least one, clip worth, at least one game worth before I went down there. And then, two-thirds of them don't get drafted. They're never heard from again. So you have to, I think, be a little bit picky and choosy when looking at some of these, just because most of us have other jobs, other aspects in our life. It would be great to have this be the only thing that I do, but it's just not the reality. So sometimes I got to make cuts.
And that's, the reality of everything. I mean, that's why NFL scouts, end up going into the media instead of sticking in the NFL, because it's a lot of work to watch these games and find guys that you really don't know. And I mean, Justis talks to him a lot, and he can probably attest to this. I mean, it's probably really tedious to kind of go over a guy, and I don't mean to insult him, but like a Bobby McCain's film from all year to see if he's worth spending time on at the Shrine game or not. So, it's an interesting dynamic, and a part of the draft process that I think a lot of people don't understand, because you hit it right on the head, Justin. We have other commitments, so you get to pick and choose who you watch. Whereas if you're a regional scout, you don't have that option. You need to have a story on each of these guys, and because if a guy comes through, falls through the cracks and ends up in Cardinals fans, in Seattle or San Francisco, and you missed him in Arizona, you usually have to answer for that. So it's just interesting the difference in what we do here for fun, and we do take it seriously, but for fun, and versus what these guys have to do for a living out there. So,
well, another thing too is, like, I know guys who work for teams who, their higher ups just say, if there's not a guy at that school, just like a guy that you think is personally draftable at that school, just don't even go. Because they, too, are doing a bunch of time management. I mean, it takes time to drive to these schools and things. So, hitting Northwest Missouri State, if they don't have a dude that year, you just drive right past, and you just go straight to Columbia. You know what I mean? They're kind of in the same predicament. That's why I said, when you're watching some of these games, it's like, okay, is someone going to flash? Like, if no one flashes, I probably don't need to watch. I probably don't need to watch these guys if they're not going to flash in a big game like this. Which is, in some ways, it's like lazy, but in some ways, it's damn. I only have so much time, and we got to figure out a way to make this more efficient.
Exactly, and on the same vein, if you're not going to flash on your biggest stage, that's not to say that you're never going to make it, but that like you guys said, South Alabama versus Bowling Green, that's those guys' time to shine. Like, that's going to be the only time that they're on prime time by themselves, all year. And if you can't show up in that game, there'll be questions about you, or worse, they won't even think about you. So, it's interesting. The best game of the early set of bowl games is the Las Vegas Bowl, and maybe the best individual matchup in terms of positional battles. You get a guy that might end up being the top senior offensive tackle in Tyson Brello versus the guy that might be the top senior rusher in Nate Orchard. Outside of those two guys, and we'll get back to them in a second, Justis, who else are you watching in this game?
On Colorado State side, Bernard Blake. He's a really good corner. I believe Thomas Melton was the first guy to point him out to me last season. Um, he's kind of a longer cut guy. When watching their defense last year, I mean, he was just kind of everywhere too, making plays. He's about like I think he's like 6 footish flat. He's got an invite to an All-Star game. He's definitely a guy to watch out for here. It sucks that he can't go like head-to-head against Drez Anderson. But at least you get some, film against, a Power 5 type of school. As far as Utah's concerned, like I said, Devontae Booker's going to end up coming out, so he's someone that you want to watch. He's from Grant High School in Sacramento, which pumps out recruits like nothing. Eric Armstead also went there, and he was like the #1 recruit in the nation 3 years ago. He ended up going to a JUCO, and now he's pretty much doing one and done at Utah. So he's definitely a guy to watch. He's kind of shifty. He's got a little bit of Arian Foster in him. I wouldn't say to that level, but he's got a little bit in him. Like I said last week too, Jeremiah Potausi, the left tackle. He's probably he's gonna declare. He's probably more of a guard prospect than anything else. I mean, he's 330 pounds playing left tackle. That's probably not gonna hang at the next level. Junior Salt, one of their guards, he's another guy who might be, he's probably a late rounder. He'll definitely be in a camp if nothing else. He's another junior college transfer. Utah has a bunch of those guys. Like you said, Nate Orchard, Brian Belchin, who's kind of a safety linebacker hybrid. Someone said he was like a first rounder last year. I remember that happening during the summer hot takes. They were like, oh yeah, Brian Belchin's going to be a first round pick. He ended up getting hurt, and suffice to say, he doesn't have that first round hype now. He's a senior. He's probably going to end up in a camp. He's probably going to be a special teams guy if he hangs out on the roster. If nothing else, I mean, it's just another guy to watch. Eric Rowe, that tall corner, he's kind of like him and Blake are going to be interesting because a lot of teams like Green Bay, a lot of teams like Seattle, they're not even going to give a look to guys who are under 6 foot or guys who are under 6 or 5'11" at least. And these guys are going to be way higher on their boards than other teams. As far as a futures guy to go, Lowell Ludolele, Star's little brother, he's really good. Like, he's a freshman. He is unbelievable. This guy's going to be a first-round pick, too. We definitely need to start watching this guy, coming into the next season.
Justin, for you, you've been kind of on the Ty Sombrello bandwagon since it started. How important is this week against Nate Orchard?
Well, I think that when you talk about Sombrello, the two biggest questions are his arm length, which will be determined when he gets measured at Senior Bowl, and then level of competition. And I don't really have a concern about his level of competition, but this is the matchup that he's going to have that's going to ease people's fears. I mean, to go against Nate Orchard, 17.5 sacks, and we've talked about Orchard, he's not necessarily the most explosive or quickest off the snap. He's just a relentless pass rusher / run defender. So Sombrello's got to have his work cut out for him, but I think this is the type of matchup that he's going to do very well with because he plays to the whistle. He's a brawler. He's got good footwork. He's got his hands in the right place. He's one of the most polished offensive tackles technique-wise that is going to be available in this draft. So I really like him. For me, he's my top left tackle prospect right now, and I can see people will want to move him to guard or right tackle, but I think he's got the ability to stay where he is. I really compare him in that respect to Joel Bitonio last year. I don't think he's quite the athlete that Bitonio is, but I think he's coming out of that Mountain West. He's got that same mentality, that same demeanor, and I've really been impressed. I think this is going to be a really good matchup for both guys, but my money would be on Sombrello to come out ahead, and then it should be a good test for both of them heading into the Senior Bowl.
Nate Orchard is a guy that you haven't – I mean, you like him at the end of round 1, early day 2 Justis, but he's not a math rusher, I believe. He's not exactly what you look for in a edge rushing prospect. How
Right.
important is this game for him?
Oh, it's going to be pretty big. I was looking at, just the offensive line and the edge rushers for the Pac-12 because I started making my list for guys I need to start watching for next year. So I started, watching some juniors and things like that, and I was like, man, there's really like no edge rushers in the Pac-12. So being able to judge a guy like Orchard on that relative scale is kind of odd. And also when you talk about, Pac-12 left tackles, I mean, outside of Fisher, who was a right tackle to start the year, and Pete, who, Pete's Pete. At this point, we know who Pete is. It's really hard to see what kind of competition they are. So to see against a guy like Sombrero, who we know is a player, is going to be interesting. Because, as much as, like, in the SEC, you're going to be able to get that, like, every game, right? Like, you'll be able to, you'll move from Cam Robinson to the big dude that they got at Ole Miss and stuff like that, to I.L. Collins, to Cedric Abuhi. In the Pac-12, you really don't have that stretch of, left tackles and stuff. So, yeah, it'll be interesting. He's definitely more of a tech guy than an athlete. So, you're kind of worried about him peaking already. It'll be interesting to see how his combine goes, because I wouldn't be surprised if he had a really, really bad combine and he ended up being like a day 3 prospect.
That's an interesting take, because I'm a guy that likes Orchard. I think
I like him too. He was kind of like one of my guys coming into the year. Him, Holy Kikaha, who I also don't think is going to be a huge athlete at the combine, and Jake Fisher were really like the 3 Pac-12 guys that I was like, hey, people should be watching these because he's a freak. I mean, Orchard's been beating Pete for 3 years. I mean, he was making years ago. That were making plays on Pete, and this was back, in the summer I was writing this stuff when everyone thought, Pete was going to be, a potential number 1 pick. I was like, you guys, I mean, if we're thinking Pete's going to be this good, I mean, we really need to be paying attention to Orchard because Orchard's been eating his lunch for 3 years.
And now we know better on Pete, so I mean, there's that too.
Like I said, you got to grade him on the relative scale.
Yeah.
I really think we really need to start watching more and paying attention who the level of competition are. I know we like to think like a win is a win is a win type of stuff in sports, but your opponent matters so much. I mean, I was watching Henry Anderson, the big 5 tech for Stanford, against Oregon State, and Oregon State really only has one serviceable offensive lineman, Isaac Suomelo. And he was hurt for that game. And, I mean, Henry Anderson just dominated that entire match. And you kind of almost have to throw it out because you're like, okay, he's playing against high schoolers. Like, he's playing against really good high schoolers. Another note on Suomelo, I actually tweeted at the Football Scoop staff, the guys who break a bunch of the coaching stuff. And they said that his father isn't going to be back at Oregon State. And that's really the only reason that he was at Oregon State, and he has another year of eligibility. So I would be interested in seeing if Isaac Suomelo actually declares. If he does declare, he's probably the best center prospect in this class, and I don't think that's an over-exaggeration at all. He was like a 5-star recruit coming out of high school. His dad coaches at the FCS level. He's just a really, really good football player. The only issue is like. He was kind of like born and raised in Corvallis, and he was hurt this season. So I don't know if he'll want to declare after he missed parts of the year. But that's another guy to keep an eye on as far as like these rumors are going.
Anything else on this game, gentlemen? Again, probably the best individual matchup of the early season bowl. Probably one of the top matchups in terms of just left tackle versus pass rusher that you'll get in the bowl season. Anything else?
Yeah, I mean, you got Garrett Grayson at quarterback, one of only 2 officially accepted invite Senior Bowl quarterbacks. And then a guy I really like is, we've talked about Grayson a ton, so we don't have to touch on that so much, but he's probably one of the top senior quarterbacks, 4th, 5th round guy at the earliest, though. But a guy I really like is D. Hart, running back for Colorado State. He's a junior, but he's a transfer from Alabama. He had a couple knee injuries early in, I think, might have been in high school. He injured the same knee twice. He looks all the way back. He averaged about 7 yards a carry for Colorado State. He's a smaller guy, but he's got a ton of burst, and he scores a lot of touchdowns. He can catch. I really like D. Hart, and I would not be surprised at all with Jim McElwain taking the Florida job and Grayson, Sambrelo, Bernard Blake, some of their more talented players going on to the NFL as seniors. I wouldn't be surprised one bit if D. Hart follows suit and goes pro.
Running back's an interesting position in general because, you know, the Booker thing, as Justice has talked about the last 2 episodes. You know, these guys declaring early, I don't ever advocate leaving early unless you know you're going to be drafted day 1 or day 2. But at the running back position and how much more you're used in college than you are the pros, I think it is maybe of the position, maybe the smartest to declare early. I still don't advocate it, but I mean, it's something that I understand a lot better, I think, is what I'm trying to get at.
Yeah, and, you know, it's weird because running back, there's, like, 2 sides of it because a lot of it's, like, style play. So, like, I know Darren Reeves, who declared last year out of University of Alabama Birmingham, and he ended up being an undrafted free agent. He got a 3rd-round grade from the NFL Draft Advisory Board. So even then, there's, like, no guaranteed, there's no promise in all of this. And, yeah, it's hard to do the math for running backs, man. I just have no idea what to do with this market.
And I think a guy like Hart, having already had 2 serious knee injuries, and then proving now that he's all the way back from those injuries and showing burst and showing speed, I get a feeling a guy like that's more likely to make the jump rather than stick around, risk injury, especially with a coaching changeover. So I would. It's almost like I would be surprised if he went back.
Die again. R.I.P. Seth. He's done. Yeah, I agree with you. D. Hart was the guy that I was looking at for next year. I believe Colorado State also has a linebacker. I'm blanking on his name. Davis? Something like that? That's on NFL radars. But yeah, I mean, I think we've covered it pretty well. I mean, this is clearly the best game out of all the early slates. And you know, you're just able to see, you know, strong-on-strong matchups of guys who are actually going to play in the NFL against each other, which we can't really say about the other games. I mean, really, the other games, you have a couple potential guys sprinkled in. It really seems like on Colorado State and Utah, you know, just both very well-coached teams. There's players on both sides of the ball in pretty much every aspect of the game.
Yeah, and they've been, you know, two fun teams to watch throughout the season for various reasons. You know, Colorado State more for the offensive side of the ball, and Utah more for the defensive side of the ball. But both schools have a lot of potential. The one thing I did want to mention was you named Junior Salt, the guard. Mm-hmm. He's one of the older prospects in this draft class. He'll be, I think, a 27-year-old rookie. So probably diminishes his chances of getting drafted.
Yeah, he's definitely a late rounder, if anything else. I think he'll end up in a camp, though. Those older guys, even if they don't get drafted, they always end up in camps. Because the issue is that you don't have to invest. You know, it's like the cost benefit type stuff. Where you're like, oh, okay, I don't have to give him a signing bonus really, and you know the opportunity cost of someone I could have picked up in the 7th round isn't like that. Like I believe Ole Miss had some nose tackle, like 2 years ago, who was like 26 or something, and everyone thought he was going to be, you know, fringe draftable, and then Green Bay ended up picking up on, you know, as one of their, you know, 90 camp bodies on the team. Those guys seem to, from my experience, they seem to stick on camp rosters more than they do get drafted, and that's why I was kind of on the fringe of calling him a day 3 type of guy.
Senior Bowl.
So have we lost Seth altogether?
No, he's back. We got him.
Internet. I don't know what's going on. Senior Bowl invites this year. we're not going to go all over all 86 because nobody has that kind of time on their hands right now. But the names that were announced today, there were some big names. The first one was Connor Neighbors from LSU. He's a fullback. I mean, fullbacks now, we kind of talked about this. Is this, I mean, he's a special teamer, and is there really anything a whole lot to pay attention to here?
I have no idea. I haven't paid attention that much to Connor Neighbors at all. I have no clue how he plays or any of that. But you're right about the fullback thing. I mean, what, maybe half of the league uses a true fullback now?
The next one, and probably big one, was surprising to you, Justin, or do you think it's important for guys like Collins and TJ Clemmings to show up to the Senior Bowl?
I was a little surprised that Collins accepted the invite. It had been kind of widely known that he had an outstanding invite for a while, so it took him he did some thinking about it, it seems. But in the end, I like this because some people like me are skeptical of his ability to play left tackle. Now, I read some tweet from Roto World Draft today that says that scouts love him at left tackle. So this could be one of the times where I'm just missing the boat on this, and that wouldn't be the first or the last time. But I'm going to like to see him there, to see him competing. I think he made a good call, and I'm happy that he's going because he seems like a player who has a lot of confidence in himself and who's wanting to erase any doubts that might be out there about his ability to play left tackle. So I'm happy that he's going. I was a little surprised, but good for him, and I think it's a good sign.
Anything to add on Lyle, Justis?
Not really. Yeah, I'm pretty much with Justin there. I like him as a tackle. I really want to see him hang at left tackle. But that'll be shown in drills and stuff. As far as guys who have turned down stuff, Devontae Parker turned down the Senior Bowl. And, I think there's, a 3-round separation between him and Kevin White. So, yeah, I don't know. I don't like that at all. I mean, Parker looked really slow out of his breaks and stuff against Florida State. I know he had a big game against him, but when you look at, his individual attributes, I don't think I'm going to be a huge Parker guy.
Plus, he's coming off a foot injury, too.
Yeah, and what's the thing you don't want, man? The thing you don't want for skill players is foot injuries. It's literally, if you have any issue with your back or your head, those are the two, those are the hugest knocks you could have as an NFL player. And then if you're a skill player, if you have any issue with your foot, that's an issue. That's why, Eddie Lacy fell to the second round because he had to have his foot fused. And teams were just scared. This guy is a guy who literally runs for a living, and he has issues with his feet. How is this going to translate? And those tend to pop up later in your career too. So, yeah, I'm not going to be a Parker guy. I think I'm firmly on the anti-Parker wagon at this point based on, what people think his value is.
And your Twitter is going to be ablaze after that tape.
Just destroyed.
Who is the next guy here? Sorry, I lost my Twitter feed. Keeps going down. Clayton Gathers from Central Florida. I think you've talked about him before, haven't you, Justin?
I don't remember talking about him, but I do know that he's really one of the only players worth watching on that team as far as draft eligible guys, outside from a couple of receivers. But people like these safeties that come from. Yeah, I remember Jonathan Cyprien caught a lot of momentum heading into the Senior Bowl. So maybe Gathers is a player who can pick up that kind of steam, and it's a good showcase for players like that because we've talked about this before. When you're evaluating defensive backs on screen, you don't necessarily see them all the way. So a player like Gathers in a Senior Bowl setting with people watching him in live practice, they'll be able to tell if he can cover the ball downfield or if he's just an in-the-box guy. So safeties have a lot to gain and a lot to lose from being in these individual one-on-one practices.
Thoughts on Gathers, Justis, if you have any?
I really haven't seen him. I've seen UCF's receiver, and now after that Bob McGinn piece, I need to put their tight end on a watch list. But outside of that, I haven't really paid attention much to any UCF football this season.
Yeah, there's no Blake Bortles, so really no reason to watch. Let's be honest about that.
Hey, can we give a shout to your boy for being on Blake Bortles way early? Like I was cutting draft breakdown videos of this guy, and scouts were telling me this dude came out of nowhere, and I was like, y'all should have listened to me. Like, I've been trying to tell you since that bowl game against Ball State in 2012 that this dude was gonna be a player, and no one listened to me.
Yeah, Bortles was the guy I liked the most last year. He wasn't my top quarterback, but he was the guy I liked the most last year. And I talked about it after that Akron game. Yeah, let's just see if the Jags cannot ruin him. That's all I ask at this point. I know, now my Twitter is going to be a blur.
Yeah, now you're blocked by half of Twitter.
Jeff Heuerman from the Ohio State University. Is he going to be the top tight end, Justis?
I like Clive Walford. But after him, yeah, I think those are definitely the top two. Some might have Nick O'Leary up there, but those are clearly the top two seniors. Like I said, I mean, tight end classes just are not deep in general. Those are probably the two that can make a run for being starting tight ends, as senior guys that can make a run at being a starting tight end from day one.
He's underutilized in what Ohio State does, though, is he not, Justin?
Yeah, absolutely. I really thought he'd be a bigger part of the offense, but he started out the year injured, and I think J.T. Barrett just got comfortable with some other guys. And by the time Heuerman came back, he was just really working his way into the passing game. But what I love about him is he's such a tenacious blocker, and he's such a big part of what they do in the running game and in pass protection. He's a really big guy. He's like 6'5", 260, and by all accounts, he's going to be an athletic freak. His school bio says he benches 225 30 times, and that he has a 35-inch vert, and that he runs like a 4.7. If he does all that at 260 at the combine, people are going to be, bumping him up the draft board. So I think it's somebody said, his contribution in the passing game, they were worried about his production. I get that, but as somebody who's watched all the Ohio State games this year, he catches the ball when they throw it to him in that offense. But what he's asked to do as a blocker, and then when he is asked to come up with a big catch, he can do it. I have a lot of confidence. He would be my top tight end right now.
Kevin White accepted his Senior Bowl invitation. Probably outside of the guy that we'll get to a little bit later that has not accepted but has an invitation, probably the biggest wide receiver name on the board so far. Justin, you've been he's been your guy from the beginning, your number one guy in this class, I believe. Is this surprising to you?
That he took the invite? No. It's not surprising because I think these receivers want to come out and separate themselves from each other. Kevin White getting an opportunity to do that after kind of slowing down as the season went on. And I think the big part of that, having checked out West Virginia a couple of games late in the year, is teams were just selling out to cover him after what he was doing to teams early in the year. I think he's still a tough one-on-one matchup. He's got the skills to be a good route runner. He wasn't asked to run a ton of routes. He's a JUCO transfer, so he's a little raw in that area, but he definitely has the skills. I think it's a good place for him to showcase if he has enough speed and is able to separate down the field. But one thing we know is that he can get contested passes, and I think, like Justis mentioned, with Parker opting out, I think this is a chance for Kevin White to cement himself as the top senior wide receiver. I've had no doubt all along that he's the top senior receiver in the class, but now he has a chance to really put his stamp on it.
Yeah, and I agree. What's interesting is Phil Savage was talking about Sammy Coates, and how he was eligible and stuff. It's fun to see Phil Savage make plays for underclassmen on Twitter. That's one of my favorite things about 2014 at this point, is just him just slyly like, Mariota and Hundley could be at the game, like they're eligible, stuff like that. And that compounded with the fact that Adrian Hubbard was at the Senior Bowl last year after he declared, and he ended up being an undrafted free agent, and I'm pretty sure he's on either the Packers practice squad or IR. So just seeing him make a play for guys like that is interesting to me. He's probably Coates is probably another guy who I could see that would blow up at the Senior Bowl as far as to that level. I don't know if Duke Williams has his degree yet. He just transferred from a community college, but it sounds like he also is going to declare from Auburn. He's another guy who I could see exploding through, the quote-unquote like draft process. But I'm not sure if he's eligible for the Senior Bowl, because I wouldn't assume he'd be able to get his degree in a term or two. Or I guess he must have been there since January, so it's probably 3 terms. So 3 terms at Auburn. I'm not sure if he's going to be able to. He was able to get his degree in that time.
They make him go to class at Auburn?
Yes, Seth. Come on.
It's not Alabama. My bad. The other Kevin White, the poor guy, he's going to have to deal with this all process from TU, the defensive back. Thoughts on him, Justis?
Who was that again? Sorry, it cut out for the second.
Kevin White from TCU.
Oh, he's kind of like the undersized guy. I haven't honestly seen too much. I know their linebacker is getting a lot of hype. And then, what's his name? Chucky Hunter, their defensive tackle, is supposed to be some sort of freak athlete. So as far as like TCU defense is concerned, those are the 2 guys I've seen the most. He kind of looked the part. I mean, I don't think he's gonna. He's not Jason Verrett. He might be like the Steven Nelson type, who also plays for Oregon State. Just kind of an undersized cornerback who's gonna make. He'll last in the NFL for a while, but he'll have to play special teams and stuff. From what I saw, I didn't see him necessarily like a starter, but he looked like he could stick on the bottom end of a roster.
Doran Grant from Ohio State, Justin. How much can he show at the Senior Bowl here?
I think it's a big showcase for him, because Doran Grant at times last year when they had Bradley Roby still there. Teams were kind of going away from Roby, and Grant had to make some big plays. And there were a couple games where Roby was getting burned, and Grant was actually looking like the better player. Now I don't think that is the case. Grant is a solid player. He had a really good, strong senior season, and he finished really strong with 2 picks in the Big Ten championship game. He can get his hands on the ball. I think he had like 9 pass breakups, 3 picks. He's just a solid player. He's got decent size. Ohio State fans, I don't think would ever have considered him like a potential day 2 pick, but I almost think he's played his way up into that conversation. So if he has a strong week of practice at the Senior Bowl, that's a possibility for him. At this point, I would probably slot him at early day 3 with a shot to move up, and of course that's depending on who declares. But he really I know Wisconsin has some terrible quarterback play, but he really put himself on some radars with that Big Ten championship game and took people back to the tape to watch him.
Yeah, and he's one of Dan Brugler's guys too, who's from Ohio, and he watches the Buckeyes almost religiously. He said that Grant was the guy that he had some hope for coming into the season, but has definitely helped himself with how productive he's been this year.
Tyler Lockett was the other receiver that accepted this week. What are your thoughts on him, Justice?
Oh, he did really well as a return man. I watched a lot of him in the preseason, but this year I believe the only Kansas State game I saw was against Auburn because it was like on a Thursday or something. So I can't really speak to it too much. I mean, he looked the part. He has a pedigree. Kansas State generally puts out decent receivers. Shouts to Chris Harper, who I still believe can get it done. Yeah, like I said, I mean, I haven't seen him too much this year, but if he looks anything like he did in the preseason, he should be able to stick as like a, like fourth-ish round pick.
Nick O'Leary from Florida State, the Mackey Award winner, no matter how much people bitch about it.
Should have gone Max.
That's going to be some of my hot takes, I think. He'll be at the Senior Bowl. Time to kind of prove people wrong, or I guess prove them right. Any thoughts on him, Justin? I know we've talked about him a little bit, so we don't have to go too in depth.
I just want to make sure you guys know that he's Jack Nicklaus's grandson. I don't know if you guys are aware of that. Nick O'Leary is just he's like an H-back type of guy, and I wouldn't, we talked about Hireman and Walford. Those guys are more prototypical tight ends. I don't think Nick O'Leary is a fit for every team's offense, and we've seen guys his size kind of flame out in the past, even though they were productive college players. I think O'Leary enjoyed a really good junior season, and then as a senior, draft people caught up to him. But I think he's a day 3, mid to late day 3 pick. I just don't think that type of player has a huge role on the majority of teams in the NFL.
Somebody said he could be Dallas Clark. Is there? I don't see it. I don't see him being that athletic.
Someone said he was going to be John Kuhn too. Yeah, everyone's just like, oh, he's going to be a Packer. This is just kind of what happened. Like he's just going to be.
He might be DJ Williams.
Oh my God.
He might be DJ Williams.
I still believe DJ Williams can play. I'm somehow tricked into every single one of these H-backs. I broke down Beasley versus Cam Irving for Matt Wallman's site this past week. We did like a little Google Hangout thing and watched it together. And Beasley dominated him in the run game. Like he would just throw him to the side and things. Like it was really bad. Beasley's 230 pounds. When Nick O'Leary has to go against legitimate NFL defensive linemen, how is that going to look? Because that's not going to be pretty. I'm not going to be a big Nick O'Leary guy by any means. I think we're all pretty much on the same page here. We're kind of spent on the Nick O'Leary, just everything. I mean, he made it. He should have made it to the Senior Bowl for what kind of a name he is, on what team he's been on, and the kind of production that he's had. But as far as how much talent he truly possesses, I'm not. Yeah, I wouldn't touch him until probably the 5th round at the earliest.
The last couple names we've talked about quite a bit, but Marcus Golden and Garrett Grayson. Grayson's not a surprise because we've talked about it a lot. The weak senior class of quarterbacks. What are your thoughts on Golden? I know neither of you guys are really high on him. You guys see him more as a spot pass rusher from the interior because he's not he's not big, but he can move a little bit on the inside. Is this an important spot for him to be in, kind of singled out and everything? Justin?
Yeah, I think they could get creative with him in the practices. They might try and put him up against running backs to see if he can cover and see what the limits of his athletic ability are. You can see in these practices, especially when you're there live. And they televise them now, so you can get a glimpse of it. But the one thing I'll say about Golden is he's going to be a pain in the ass for whoever's trying to block him in these drills. He's going to work hard. He's going to try and get the most out of his ability. It's just the ability that I think is limited, and that's where he's gonna fall. I think he has potential to get into that top 100 because of what he does and what position he plays. But as far as like what he's going to produce at the NFL level, I don't know what he has. I think for a guy like him, that's where these practices can be really important. But you also will see on the field there at the Senior Bowl, you'll see stark contrasts in athleticism, and you'll see, he might not really be able to do anything other than put his hand in the dirt and be a situational pass rusher.
You guys good with the Senior Bowl talk for now?
Yeah, generally. I mean, Marcus Golden, I'm not going to be a huge fan of his. Like I said, some people were saying he's up there with Ray. I'm not even a huge Ray guy, but to say him and Ray are on the same tier, that's kind of like crazy, like legitimately insane. Golden to me, like I said, I mean, it's the same thing with the Orchard thing. I'm much more interested in athletes than anything else when we're talking about edge rushers. So Golden is like a I think I gave him like a 6th-round pick, the lowest grade that I've given an edge rusher so far that I've seen.
You're generally negative, so I don't listen to anything.
I'm a terrible human. Actually, mocking the draft, our dude Dan Kadar came out with his top 100 this week, and he actually had Golden at 27. And that's probably the ranking that I disagree with the most. Yeah, I think I tweeted out just straight up, like, scorching hot take, like, Golden take. Like, I'm just like, oh, man. Yeah, I am, man, people in Missouri are going to hate me for not loving their defensive linemen.
No, I mean, they're tough, so. Hot takes. What are your thoughts here on some of the hottest takes of the weekend? You don't have to talk about Manziel, Justin. It's okay.
I'm going to steer clear of all those hot takes because hopefully that will work itself out. But the hot take that I wanted to talk about that got some people up in arms the other day was Greg Gabriel.
Yep.
Long-time NFL personnel guy.
Hot take of the week of the year.
Yeah, Greg Gabriel wrote 2 what I thought were pretty good evaluations, one of Mariota and one of Jameis Winston. And he came out sounding very much like he was favoring Jameis Winston as a quarterback prospect. But then he ended the Jameis Winston piece by saying, I wouldn't draft him in any round. I can't say that that really shocked me. I kind of alluded to something like that way back in September, I want to say, where, if you really believe what Jameis Winston was accused of doing, if you really believe he did something, if he did that or something like that, then you might not draft him, and he might be off your board. And I'm sure that Greg Gabriel's not the only one who thinks that, but it still comes out as a scorching hot take because there is no conviction. There was no suspension. There is no case, really. So you've kind of got to use your guesswork or your own private eye stuff. I'm going to trust that Greg Gabriel knows more than I do because of his sources, but that's the scorching hot take of the week. Jameis Winston, wouldn't draft him in any round.
Yeah, and that's something we talked about, like you said, in September, where it's completely plausible if some teams will not have him on the board because of the off the field stuff and just not even the accusations, so to speak, but just the fact that he's got so many questions all the time about him, and he's got the incident in the cafeteria where it's not a big deal. He's a college kid. He's not even 21, I don't think, but dude, you're under investigation for rape, and you get on a table and you scream that out. Like that's probably where teams are going to be like, I just don't know if he's smart enough off the field to, be responsible and not put himself in a position to get in trouble, as opposed to what he's actually done or has not done off the field. So
and then guys, you have this other quote that he just had recently where he's at this hearing for student code of conduct, and he compares being falsely accused of rape to being an actual rape victim. If he's been falsely accused, I really feel for him, but somebody needed to coach him up on that statement. That was not the right statement to make in
you
this
can't say that
atmosphere.
stuff. You really can't.
Yeah, and I think that has a lot. That has more to do with the concern of who he is off the field, in just terms of can he make smart decisions not to get himself in trouble, or is an NFL team going to have to give him a babysitter basically to make sure that he stays out of trouble all the time. Justis, you have any hot takes this week?
That one really consumed everything. Just looking through this Kadar top 100, and Dan's a good dude. He's like a legitimate nice person that I've met over Twitter. As far as like the shocking grades in his top 100, he has Eric Kendricks, who in that Bob McGinn piece, he had scouts saying he was a third, fourth round guy. He has Eric Kendricks 13th overall. Marcus Goldston at 27, like we already discussed a little bit. I don't agree with that grade, but those guys aren't my type. And then way down on the list at 97 is Gerard Holloman, who Tony Pauline and Matt Miller broke the news that he was going to declare this after this season. So to see a guy who, people were talking about Gerard Holloman winning the Heisman as a safety. This is kind of like a one-year wonder type of guy. I think currently he's tied with the for the NCAA single season record in interceptions. Some are talking about him as a first-round pick. So to see him so low as almost, 97. That's almost a fourth-round pick. That's almost an early fourth-rounder. So to see that split is interesting. I wrote about Holloman for Football Savages a couple weeks ago. Does not look great against the run. Like, people are not sometimes I think, people are just exaggerating about things. Like I was saying before this about Manziel. I was like, oh, he was actually as bad as the media said. Oh, okay, that's interesting, because usually we just blow out this stuff. When people say Gerard Holloman, really does not want any part of a run game, they're not exaggerating at all. Like, he runs scared when he tries to close in on guys. And I wonder how much of that is him protecting his shoulder, which he hurt last season, and how much of it is instincts. I guess the team's going to have to make that judgment. But just seeing the split on Kendricks, Golden, and Holloman from what we've seen from the general national media is interesting.
With Holloman, I remember, I think it was Matt Miller, somebody compared him to Ed Reed.
And Bucky Brooks, yeah.
Yeah, and then you mentioned that, and that just seems counterintuitive that you would compare him to Ed Reed, but he doesn't want to, go in the run game. So.
Oh yeah, that was one of my things. That was one of the things that I wrote in this Football Savages thing. Was like, I understand these Ed Reed comparisons, and they're coming from very intelligent people who have better credentials than I do. But when you watch them, Ed Reed smashed people, and I embedded a YouTube link of Ed Reed playing on punt returns and just absolutely killing a dude, calling him an F-boy after knocking him onto the ground. And I was like, yeah, Holloman's not doing that. There's a bit of a difference in the run game and how physical these guys are going to be.
Yeah, and that is exactly. That's a little bit of the difference there. Any others tonight, guys?
I think we should mention that Todd McShay, he's starting to trickle out his rankings, and he had Danny Shelton, the big defensive tackle from Washington, as his number 9 overall player. Shelton was really productive this year. I think he had a good year. I think he cleans up a lot of sacks from Kakaha and other guys on that defense. I don't think he's going to be that type of productive player. He's more of a big nose tackle kind of guy for me. And those guys don't tend to go 9th overall. So I found that to be a pretty high, a lofty ranking for Danny Shelton. It wasn't like a scorching hot take, but I had to get the oven mitt out for it.
Is he better than Justin Ellis was? Or is he just at a bigger school with more production?
It's a good question, and it kind of just reminded me of like Lewis Nix, how people had him in the top 10 around this time last year, and he ends up. I know knee injury had a lot to do with his fall, but Yeah, I don't know that Danny Shelton in the top 10. I mean, I think at this point people are just kind of struggling to find top 10 players.
Yeah, and one point I'd like to put out to Packer fans, because Green Bay's looking for a nose tackle probably next year, because they have an undrafted free agent and a dude who signed a 1-year contract, LaTroy Guion, playing nose tackle, because B.J. Raji, who signed a prove-it deal after getting injured and after turning down $8 million per year. He turned down $8 million a year. He got hurt and tore his bicep. So they really have no depth coming back at nose tackle outside of an undrafted free agent rookie. And Packer fans are just like, well, we'll just draft a nose tackle in the first round. And I'm very quick to remind them, there have been 2 consensus first-round pick nose tackles in the past decade. And that was Dontari Poe and B.J. Raji. They're nose tackles don't just happen. There's a lot of planet theory that's involved with this. They don't make 330-pound humans that just fall off of trees. So yeah, seeing Sheldon rank so high, that kind of shocks me. I mean, like I said, I really think he's a lot like Justin Ellis, just at a bigger school on a bigger stage. And like you said, Justin, he cleans up a lot. A lot of those sacks, I believe it was a Hawaii game that I was watching where he had 3 sacks or something. But the thing was, the sacks came 5 seconds into a down, and it was because the quarterback had to move up because Kikaha was crashing from the edge, or Shaq Thompson was blitzing or something like that. So yeah, it's all, like I said, I always bring up Kelsey Corals as an example of a guy who cleaned up for Clowney an entire season, put up stats declared, and then ended up being an undrafted free agent. I think when people really start digging and don't just see, oh, this is a huge guy with production at a big school, they're going to start, knocking him down a little bit more.
Any last thoughts tonight, Justis?
No, that's about it. Yeah.
Justin, you got anything before you head off to the warm Florida weather?
No, I just want everyone to just realize that Johnny Manziel has only played 1 professional game so far. So if we could just keep, I know Merrill Hodge has already made up his mind, but
shouts to Merrill Hodge, who said Brian Brown would take Aaron Rodgers' job, and Aaron Rodgers would never start it down for the Packers.
See, that's what I'm talking about. So if we could just chill for a week, but I'm going to be in Florida, so really, people do whatever you want.
All right, well, we'll look forward to it next week and get some more games in and some more hot takes. So I appreciate it, guys, and have a good night, everybody.
Take care, guys.
Hey, guys.